Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's such a treat to have you, and it's so fun to have met you June 2022
Oh
in
my gosh, is that how
Paris.
long ago it was? Holy smokes.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know. It's been a while.
Yeah, well, that's great, but you've become my very reliable Paris friend. It seems like every time I'm there now, we manage to coordinate being there, which I love.
I love to. It's a treat.
Yeah, yeah. And to have
And
like and to have things we do and places we go and people we hang with and that sort of thing, it makes it feel really like the second home that I aspire for it to be. So that's really fun. So thank you
it's
for your contribution to that.
so fun. Well, thank you. And speaking of second home, somebody just rented an apartment in Paris.
I did. I did. I can't believe it. And I'm astonished at the fact that I was able to get it done. But yes, I just rented an apartment in Paris. So it's my new part time Paris home.
Love it. I'm so
Yeah.
excited for you.
Thank you.
Now, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how your perspective has shifted over the years as you've moved into midlife.
Well, I think we
No
have
big
to
deal.
start with yeah, no big deal. But I think I probably want to go first on the record as saying, in my view, I am well past midlife. I'm I'm in whatever the after is, because if you do the math, there's no chance I'm in the middle right now. so
Midlife
so
plus.
yeah. So I really think of myself as I feel midlife, but technically I'm on the very much the older end of that sort of group. I absolutely do not and can't imagine ever resonating with the idea of being a senior. But technically, the world would like to define me that way. So how's that for a bit of a starter? I think my most important role, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the mother of two men, and I had them late. So I had my kids when I was 40. And I think that contributes to the fact that I feel like I'm entering into a phase that is still has lots of possibility in it, because a lot of people enter into this phase when they're quite a bit younger than I am. But because I had my kids late, this whole thing got pushed out by a few years. So I'm the mother of two men in their 20s, and one of them has a child. So I'm a grandmother, which is weird to say and very cool. And professionally, I'm an executive coach and I own a coaching company. And I've been doing that since before it was a thing, really. I had other careers before that, but it really is the only thing I really resonate with. And I've spent so long doing it that I've forgotten I've done anything else.
Yeah. And so you manage people, you work with
I
clients,
do.
you manage a team.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, they don't take a lot of management. They are a bunch of very talented, very grown up professionals. But yeah, I have 16 coaches that are on my team, and my job is to find work for them. And so I always say that my job is to distribute high quality work to them so they can just focus on doing what they do well, which is the coaching work. So I've been doing that. I've run that business model for a very long time now, and that still seems to be working, for which I'm very grateful.
Well, so tell me about how you've embraced change over the years. I mean, particularly, I like to think of midlife as say 35 plus, but for you in particular, having kids in your 40s or 40-ish,
Yeah.
how have you embraced the changes that come along with that?
I can't claim to have always embraced them. I mean, kicking and screaming comes to mind. There was a moment. So, for anyone who's not seeing me on screen, I have gray hair. And I spent a long time, as many of us do, coloring and highlighting and doing all the things. And at one point, and I was probably about 50, I think, I was sitting in my stylist's chair and we were talking about the color. And I just said, you know what? I think I'm done. I think I just need to let it be what it is. And he shook his head and he said, your kids are too young. I just don't think you want them to have the gray haired mother. And I thought, "Oh, okay, you know what? That makes a certain amount of sense." And then we scroll ahead to when I was about 55. And I said, how much is naturally gray right now? And he looked and he said, yeah, about 70%. I said, fine, we are done. If I'm 70% gray, then I think it's time. And a client of mine has a great phrase. She says she needed her face and her hair to look like they were going to the same party. so but I think that moment of allowing the gray to show was, I think, quite pivotal because that was a real statement of this is where I am in life and I'm not trying to hide it. And I'm doing my very best to embrace it. And some days are better than others. But that was, I think, an important moment in the understanding of who I am as this midlife or this older person. I think having kids in university and graduating from university and having jobs, if I have adult kids, I that defines me in a certain way that very few other things so obviously do. So that's been another thing about them being adults and being on their own and needing me differently. I'm not going to say less, but differently. And it's that in and of itself has created an enormous amount of space that honestly, thanks to COVID, I didn't have to confront for a really long time. My youngest went to university at the beginning of COVID. And so that would have been a very big space and a very big opportunity to define what life beyond being a mother meant. But I didn't have to confront it for 3+ years. So there are a few moments.
Yeah. The pivotal moments or birthdays sometimes for people are big things, and
Mm,
you wrote a book that talked a lot about some big changes in your life
I did.
and how you navigated those. Do you wanna speak to that?
Yeah, so the book is called The Accidental Alpha Woman, The Guide to Thriving When Life Feels Overwhelming. And the accidental alpha is an idea that birthed itself in me when I was in the middle of a really problematic marriage, largely problematic because I was suddenly thrust into the role of being the only breadwinner, the only money earner in the house with 2 young kids. And so I was suddenly shouldering the whole load. And that was not what I had envisioned, not what I'd signed up for, not what I thought we had created. So there was this sudden moment of, hang on, I it's all on my shoulders, and that wasn't what I thought my life was going to look like. And so this idea percolated for a long time. And finally, during COVID, I thought, this is the time I just need to get it out of my head. But I needed to do it in a way that was solution oriented. And while I was in the problematic marriage and feeling all of those overwhelms and those sorts of things, I mean, you would know through your work, I can't talk about something unless I've figured out the solution. Otherwise, people worry about you, right? And I'm not going to be able to help anyone unless I've figured out how to help myself. And so, as I was trying to think about what did being an accidental alpha mean, and what was the way through it in a healthy way, and I came up with this framework, and I used the word receive as the starting letters of the framework because, and I've had this said about me, and I've said it about other strong, independent, high functioning women. We're terrible at receiving. Terrible, terrible, terrible at receiving help, at even noticing when help is being offered, much less asking for it. And so it just struck me that getting better at receiving would be something that I will always want to be mindful of. And I know for sure there are other women in that same role, fiercely independent, which I think is problematic idea in and of itself. So we can be independent, but I don't think we need to be proud of it. I can handle it if I have to, but really, is that ideal? I don't think so. So I tell a couple of stories in the book of times when people offered me help, but I almost didn't see it to my detriment. So that's the accidental alpha, the woman who didn't plan to handle it all, but is. And it's not just getting divorced and being a breadwinner. It's women who never ended up with a partner and who all the responsibilities of life are on their shoulders. Women whose spouse passes away suddenly. Women who are in the sandwich taking care of parents kind of situation. There are lots of ways that women end up in this situation. And I guess I was talking to myself and trying to offer a solution to others.
Do you remember, and I know it can be hard because you wrote the book a few years ago, but do you remember what RECEIVE stands for?
I could look it up in the book right behind me, but
It's got it in
the
my room.
I mean, it goes perfectly in your office because it's pink. So the R is for understanding the reality. And that for me is we oftentimes put blinders on to what's really going on. And before we can come up with a solution, we have to really see what's going on and whether or not we like it, whether or not it's what we hope to see. But I think checking on that reality. E is for evaluate. And that is, what does this mean to me? So now I understand what's really going on. So in my case, I had a spouse who had worked at several years. I had refused to acknowledge the idea that that might continue for a long time. Once I recognized the pattern and saw what was happening and saw that nothing was likely to change anytime soon, I then had to figure out what it meant to me. Then I had to choose what I did about it, and that's the C. And that was really okay. Now I know what it means to me. Am I willing to make choices about that? Do I understand what it means to choose this path or this path? Right? I can't remember what the next E is. I'm going to look it up because if you're right, it has been a while. But I mean, I know that there are a couple of important letters in it, like V is finding your own voice, right?
Ah,
So yeah, choose your course. Energy. Oh, energy. Yes, you love this one. The second E is managing your own energy, understanding where to invest your energy because we can't do it all, despite the fact that many of us try. And to understand when we're depleting our tanks and what we have to do to refill them. I is to go after what you need. And in my case, largely that was community. That was reaching out to people and saying, I need connection, I need activities, I need fun. Because I think I just hoped it would just show up. I thought maybe people would just invite me places and it just didn't happen. But then voice is express yourself. And one of the stories I tell in the book is a friend of mine who took up pole dancing just because there was a studio in her neighborhood and one of her friends suggested she try it. She went along grudgingly and discovered this whole new world that was just something she loved. And then ease, and ease is creating an easier life, finding the way to go forward in a way that does support you, that doesn't deplete you. So that's an overview of the framework. But the general idea is we would all do better if we would recognize when there are resources and people available to us and be willing to accept. Accepting is not a sign of weakness.
right, right. Yeah. No, and I love the reminder of the voice, the energy, and the ease. I think that is something too that happens in midlife where we're just like, how can we bridge this gap? Right? How can we just make this a little easier on
Yes.
ourselves? Right?
Yeah. And I do think there is something about midlife where you say, hang on, is that really important? I think you get better at separating what's really important from the things you think you should do or that you think other people expect you to do or whatever it is. Or maybe you just let some things go. Okay, I didn't make my bed this morning. All right, fine. Laundry's wrinkled, not folded. Okay, fine. Whatever it is, right? I One of the big decisions I made when I was at home alone with kids after the marriage ended was getting groceries delivered. And back then that was quite a big deal. But oh my gosh, that was just biggest relief. It's like to have the stuff show up. Like, "Oh, okay, I don't have to actually do all the things you do to go get the things. Costs a little more, sure. But boy, was it ever worth it.
Yes. I mean, saves there are certain things like that, right? Can I
Yeah,
outsource? Can I make this easier on me? Can I ask someone to grab something for me?
right.
Yeah, we have to get better at asking for that and recognizing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite stories from the book is a friend of mine who, when her kids were little and she was alone and she wanted to go running and she knew her neighbor sat out on his front porch reading the newspaper very early in the morning. And so she went out one day and she said, if I put the baby monitor here, will you listen to it while I go run around the block? And if you hear anything, just call me. I'll have my, she did all of these compensating measures. And he just said, sure, fine. And it turned out that she could go running every morning pretty much and feel comfortable. And this man was lovely. He didn't mind at all. It didn't inconvenience him, but she hadn't asked. Then she wouldn't have had that little time to herself in the morning and that little opportunity to get some exercise. So, and he was perfectly happy to help her out.
Yeah, yeah. It is. I think that's such an important story because it is oftentimes we're like, "Oh, no, I don't wanna bother them," or, "Oh, no." Right? And then,
Yeah.
some people are absolutely willing to assist and
Yeah.
support. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious for you too from a ritual standpoint or like your go-to self-care activities that you've observed over the years in yourself because I know you just went through a big move and of course now you just rented the place in Paris.
Well,
And so what are your like these are my go-to grounding rituals?
oh boy, I wish I was better at consistency on
Yeah.
rituals. I really do. I have never been someone who adopts a lot of structure in their life. There are small things in the morning, like I make a big jug of green juice and I make coffee, and like the coffee is meditative in and of itself. And reading, certainly finding time for fiction. I think a few years ago, I realized I hadn't picked up fiction in a while. And that really nurtures me. And so I've made a point of always having fiction on the go. In times of stress, they're always the go-to movies, the little escapist movies. But honestly, I think probably my biggest practice that I can't really characterize as a ritual necessarily, but it's travel. I am at my happiest when I'm getting on a plane and going somewhere. And yes, oftentimes Paris, but other places as well. So it just really fuels me, and I can survive a lot on the before and the after if I know there's a trip. If I know there's a new place I'm going or some new people I'm seeing or just a new experience I'm about to put myself into. So that's I don't know. Like I said, it's not like I have a few little things that not rituals exactly, but like I have a little indoor herb garden in my house. And and so I look at that and I check it and see, I mean, it takes me a month to grow a salad, but but there's just looking at it now thinking, I just like having green things growing and feeling like I'm doing something that is just it's a little bit of a novelty, it's a little bit fun, it's certainly healthy. So little things like that. I bake sometimes. I shouldn't be eating it and I don't have a lot of people to do it for, but never met a chocolate chip cookie I don't like. So a number of different things, not not a lot that's consistent. I am trying to draw more and do more art, but I haven't really anchored that in terms of practice. But that's something that I'm that's because we did a sketchbook workshop together. I'm very much trying to incorporate that more into my life.
You're so good at it. I remember I was just like, "Look at Karen."
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, just like basics. Like you're really good at figures and croissants. Mine do not look like croissants, right? Kind of
If
sad.
you're
Wah
gonna
wah
learn if
croissants.
if you're gonna learn to draw anything, let it be a croissant, right?
I know,
Um,
right?
I know, but it's one of those things. So thank you. And I mean, I had a grandfather who was an architect, and he used to do drawing things with me when I was young. And that's certainly, if I have any gift or inclination at all, it's certainly because of him. But like anything, you don't get better at something unless you do it. And so, isn't it great that I've got a little bit of innate understanding of how to put some things together? But wouldn't I be a whole lot better if I spent more time doing it? Absolutely.
Well, one thing that you mentioned was travel being an important piece for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And I'm curious for our listeners there's a lot of people who are anxious or nervous about setting out on their own, solo
Mhm,
travel, women in particular. So
mhm,
I'm curious what would you say to someone who's like, I've always wanted to go to X, whatever X is, but
uh-huh.
I'm nervous about getting to the airport. What do I pack? What do I do? What if I don't know anyone? What if I don't speak the language? All the things,
All
right?
the things. Yeah. I mean, certainly, and I've actually done a lot of writing, and I'm starting to do more work in the whole solo travel for women area because I do have people comment to me, "Oh my gosh, you went on this great trip. I so envy you." And I always think, "Well, I just bought a plane ticket. It just doesn't feel like right? It doesn't feel like." And I actually just started writing on Substack, and my first post was about the first time I went to Paris. And so, generally, when someone asks me about solo travel, the first thing I want to know is whether they've ever traveled anywhere alone, like for business or whatever. Because if you've never traveled anywhere alone, don't start with something big and complicated. Travel to a nearby city in your same state or your same you know what I mean? Like, if you've never traveled solo and you live in Chicago, maybe go to New York or whatever. So,
Yes.
just do something that's a short trip that gets you used to the idea of being in an airport by yourself and doing the packing and honestly, the number one thing that people ask me about, women ask me about when it comes to solo travel is eating alone. And it just seems that that has such discomfort and fear and awkwardness and uncertainty around it. And I mean, I have a friend, she married quite soon after high school or university and was married quite a long time. And she'd been divorced for a couple of years before one day she took herself out to dinner alone in our city because she had never eaten a meal alone in a restaurant. And she understood that in order for her to have the life that she wanted going forward in case there was no partner on the horizon. She was going to have to figure these things out. But in our same city, it was a restaurant a couple of blocks away. So it was all very contained. So I like to think of it as reducing the number of variables. And if you've traveled a lot for work and you're used to getting on a plane and staying in a hotel and all that sort of stuff, then okay, maybe then you pick a place you wanted to go. But in that case, maybe you start with a place where they speak your same language because again, minimize the variables. So, but it's don't tackle too many things all at once. And obviously there's some safety things. And I mean, one thing that I try to remember, but am not always perfect on is making sure that my family has my itinerary and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I would say start small, start where you are, and then add to the complexity in gradual bits. Because the worst possible thing in the world is to have never gone anywhere and then drop yourself into a completely different world and with different money and different language and different everything. And of course, it's going to feel awful. It's going to be so uncomfortable. So, yeah, I don't recommend that at all.
Right, no, I this is such a great reminder. I mean, some people do just jump deep, right? They're just like, "I've
And
never
bless
left."
them.
And bless them. "I've never left my town. I'm now going to wherever
Yeah,
exotic
whatever.
land."
Yeah, exactly.
But most people I remember, and I don't know about you, Karen, but my first movie I went to alone, and it was
Mm.
early 20s. It was Legally Blonde, and I was like, "This is amazing." It was a matinee, no one was there. It was like me and 2 people in the audience. That first movie, that first event you go to solo, that first
Yes.
restaurant, all these things are like dipping your toe in the water. Maybe you
Yes.
fly to another state, right? Not another
Yep.
country, but just like another, and
Yep.
then slowly you build up. So I love that. It's such a great reminder of thinking of these as stepping stones.
Yes, and I agree with that first movie because I hear
Oh.
from people a lot who I've never gone to a movie by myself. Well, so I was married in my 20s and got divorced at 30 from that starter marriage. And part of the rationale behind my first trip to Paris was related to that moment in time where I thought, if I if I wait to do things until I have someone to do them with, I might never do them. And I had grandparents who were intrepid travelers and saw much of the world, and they were a real inspiration to me. And I remember thinking, if I want any of that, I better not wait. And so even if it's just see the movie, if I want to see the movie, I should probably go see the movie instead of hoping to find someone who's going to want to see it and be able to work it out. And I have lovely friends, and if I want to do something, I can almost always find someone to do it with. But if I can't, then I have to choose, do I want to not do it or do I want to do it alone?
And
It's actually, I
it's
find it's harder to do things alone in your own city, I find,
okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
then it's like, well, why are you alone? You grew up here and you live here and people, and that's weird. Like I can have lunch on a business day downtown by myself because that's the middle of a business day. But to go to a play by myself or to, I don't know, I can't even think of other good examples, but it just somehow it feels different to do it alone in the place where I should have a big network. So
Yeah.
doing it elsewhere in the world feels super easy.
That
Very
makes
weird logic,
sense.
probably. I don't
No,
know, it's kinda
no, no.
strange logic.
No, it makes sense. It's funny because as you've been talking, I was just thinking how, for me, I have found that going to, I love to bring friends along, but to go to ballets alone, to go to
Yes.
concerts alone,
Yes.
movies alone, it's really nice because you don't have to engage in commentary with anyone. It's just about the experience. You go, you sit, you absorb, and then you get to go home.
Yeah.
It's real, and I have found, Karen, there is one isolated seat at the Kennedy Center that I have found, and so it's, like, at the very back, which I like the back, and I love the aisle of anything. I
Yep.
don't like to be in the middle, and so it's aisle very far back, very top row, to climb all the way up, but there's just something about it, I'm like, "This is my seat," and
I love
I
it.
love it, yeah. So but
Yeah.
it does, it takes a while because it is in my
Yeah.
city. People might be like, "Well, doesn't she have friends?" I mean, yes, but they don't all wanna go to the ballet with me, and sometimes it's
Sure.
just really nice to treat yourself, right? You
Well,
deserve that.
yes, and if it's something you really love personally, then oftentimes the experience is something you really wanna relish and you don't wanna talk about it. You don't want someone going, "Oh, look at that." I had a moment in Paris actually in that last May when I was there where I'd been there for 2 or 3 weeks already, and because I live under a rock, apparently realized that Taylor Swift was going to be there when I was there. And I thought, I mean, the concert concert ticket prices in Europe are much less than they are in North America, like vastly less expensive. And I looked and I could get a ticket to see Taylor Swift for what I consider to be a very reasonable price and a pretty good seat. And so just as recently as last May was the first time I ever took myself to a big stadium concert by myself. I've been to symphonies and to smaller venues and that sort of thing, but I'd never gone to a giant stadium concert alone. But you know what? That was an opportunity that I didn't know if I was gonna have any other way. I certainly won't pay what you have to pay in my home city to go see her. And, yeah, so just as recently as that, there was a moment of, "Oh," and I think I was the only person in the stadium who didn't know all the words, but that's okay.
That's so funny. That's how I felt at the, 3 Harry Styles concerts I went to, and I just felt like, I am so out of this demographic, even though I wasn't. There were people of many generations there, but
Yes,
I
for
did
sure,
feel a
same.
little silly. I was just like
I
but
just felt bad that I didn't have friendship bracelets to give out. That was my problem.
no friendship bracelets. I don't know all the words. Other than that, I'm in it, right?
I was in it. It was great. And I'm really, really happy that I went. But it was this moment of, wow, I've never done this before, like on this scale in
Right.
an entirely different area. I had to go farther on the metro than I'd ever been before. I'd never been to that area, whatever, all the things. It was, in spite of the fact that I know Paris really well, it was several layers of new.
Yeah, it stayed, right? Did you go to this yeah, it's like a whole other
No, it was at La Défense. It was giant. It was, yeah. It was where
oh.
the swimming ended up at the Olympics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
no, it was
fun.
huge. It was huge. But of course, you get in line and you talk to, like, there were millions of Americans there.
Yeah. You know,
So
it's funny. I remember turning around to one person and I was like, is that the bar?" And she's like, "I don't know. I'm 16." And I was like, "Noted."
Yeah, okay. Sorry for
Anyway.
corrupting you.
Yeah, totally, totally. Do not do it. Do not look for wine.
Yeah, exactly. But I think part of the solo travel thing, to get back to your original question, is accepting that there will be discomfort. Accepting that it's going to feel a little odd if you've never eaten alone in a restaurant. It might feel a little bit strange. So how do you mitigate that? Do you, like, my thing is, I try to sit with my back to a wall so I can look out at the room. I take a book or a journal, try and chat a little bit with the server, like that sort of thing. But the concert was a great example of, I've never been here before and I've never been in this big a crowd and all the things. So just to be accepting of, there will be aspects of this that they're going to feel a little bit weird, but feel the fear and do it anyway, right?
Yes, and you raise a really good point, the discomfort, because everything about travel is uncomfortable. Okay,
It can be.
most things, right?
Okay.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful to see the sights, go to the art gallery, but even when we went to go see the d'Orsay exhibit, which came here next, I don't know if I ever told you.
Oh, no, you didn't. Oh my gosh, it's too funny.
I know I went to Paris to see it, and then and DC
Yeah,
was next.
well,
But anyway,
I would
j
rather have seen it in Paris.
me too. We that was you're absolutely right. But how crowded it was, right? It was really
Right.
challenging.
It was
So it's
really
like
challenging, yeah.
all these things are beautiful and uncomfortable.
Yep, yep. But,
Yeah.
if you don't withstand a little discomfort, you miss the opportunity to do something
Absolutely.
cool.
Yes.
So, that's the trade-off, and that's the trade-off I chose to make, to say, "I get that this will feel weird and uncomfortable, and I'm gonna do it anyway."
Right. Yes. And
So,
so important. Yeah. And just
yeah,
like touchy, you start with these little things like what is the level of comfort or discomfort that you can tolerate? Because we don't
yeah,
want to push you past, but
right.
by doing these little bits to get started, it's more comfortable in the
Yeah,
end.
but I also think it's having faith in yourself. Have I ever not figured it out? No. Sometimes better than others, but I've never not figured it out. And so that's I think an important piece of this puzzle, to just recognize, I'm a smart person. I've figured complicated things out in the past. I'll get through this. Don't know how, but I'll get through
Google Maps will get you through
it.
it.
And to Google.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
very
just
much.
remember having you probably too that lamb app, and
Oh,
trying
good
to
for you.
get around all these little avenues that twist and turn. I was like, this is gonna, yeah, yeah. Thank God
Well,
for
the
Google
story
Maps.
that I just put up on Substack was my first trip to Paris, and I got lost. Like, badly lost at night. It was before we all had GPSs in our pockets. So, it was tricky. It was pretty scary for a minute there, but I got through it. I figured it out.
You did, you did.
Yeah.
It's so funny you even say that, Karen. I had a nightmare a few nights
Oh,
ago that I was in Paris, and it was at night, and I needed to get back to a place to perform, but I needed black leggings, and I'd left in my suitcase at the hotel, but I didn't know where the hell hotel was. It was like this crazy thing, and thank goodness the alarm went off, which I never set an alarm, but we had a vet appointment that morning, and I was like, "Thank you for bringing me out of this." This was like the worst. So, yeah.
Well, one thing I think you've nailed though is the packing, right?
Oh,
Because when
good.
it comes to solo travel, only ever take carry-on because the to be hauling a giant suitcase around, I it just adds to the level of challenge. And so I think that's something that you inspire me with how you're able to do all kinds of crazy things in one trip in carry-on.
Thank you, thank you. It's amazing what you can shove it into a suitcase.
I know, right?
Well, before I ask you my last question, Karen, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners about midlife in general and what you've learned or things that you have grown to accept even about yourself that maybe you
Oh,
didn't when you were younger that you'd be willing to share?
uh, I think I'm not very good on the accepting piece. I will say that I am so far unwilling to tuck in and coast. Like I turned 65 this past summer, and in January I set up 65 new things as a list. I was determined that I was going to do 65 new things this year. And I haven't gotten that many, but it's a pretty good list so far. But that for me was not about the 65 things. It was about still being really engaged with life. And I think it's really easy, particularly if you're starting to have mobility issues or health issues or just energy issues, that sort of thing, which happens as you get older. I think it's really easy to not do the thing. And I think life is better if you do the thing, even if it's harder or you have to do it differently than you might. So I think do the thing would be would be the biggest piece of advice. And I think I'm grateful that I've still got the kind of mindset that says, yeah, I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to try the thing. I'm going to go to the place. I'm going to whatever it is. I'm grateful that I'm still in that state of mind. So,
And you are. I think back even when I met you and we're in the Tuileries, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to go see a Marie Antoinette ballet at Versailles tonight." And you're like, "I want to go." I think I'd known you like 12 hours or something. And then
if
is
that.
if that. And then the Dior Museum, same thing, right? And then I was thinking, oh, even whenever we met up with that woman who does the painting or the,
Yes.
I guess, do you call it painting? I guess
Yeah.
so with, coffee, right? I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna take a workshop before I hop on the plane or head to the airport," and you're like, "I wanna go," right? And it's just like all these just fun random things that,
Well, what
you
I
just
know
you say
about,
yes.
well, yeah, and I mean, we could call it laziness. I think it's really cool to find out what other people have chosen to do in different cities because you've chosen things that I wouldn't have chosen. I had a big list for myself, but none of those things were on my list. And so you look and go, oh, that actually looks really cool. I didn't even know that was happening. Huh, I want to do that. Right. And so I've got a couple of other friends who spend a lot of time in Paris in particular. And even when I've gone out to other places, just to find out what is it that other people have chosen as their way to have fun in that place or get to know that city or what kind of adventure they want to be on. I mean, I rode a camel in Morocco. Do you think I would have chosen that all by myself? I mean, maybe because it's an obvious one, but it's just not something I thought I would ever do. It's ride a camel.
Yeah, no, it is, it's like, how do we say yes more,
Yeah.
right?
For sure. The Fuller Life has way more yes in it. That's Shonda Rhimes' book, right? The Year of Saying Yes.
Yes,
There's
yeah.
a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
There is, and I think there's also a lot to being like discernment, right? And recognizing, but I'm also gonna say a lot more no's to this, right?
Oh boy, yes, that is as important, if not more so, because you create space when you say no. And
Right.
again, it's what standards have I set myself up for? What expectations am I attributing to other people that might not actually be true? And by the way, even if they're true, they're their expectations, not mine. I think
Right.
as women, we are much healthier if we pay less attention to other people's expectations.
Yes. All right, Miss Karen. So my last question for you.
Okay.
The name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. So how are you finding tranquility in your everyday? And you've mentioned a lot of ideas. And I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you're like, this brings me tranquility on a regular basis.
During COVID, I moved out to the East Coast of Canada and lived quite near the ocean and got reconnected with how meaningful it is to me to be near water. And so I just in March I moved back to Toronto where I'm from originally, and part of the moving back here was choosing to live near the lake. And so now I'm in a condo, but I walk out the front of my building and turn to my right, and Lake Ontario is a half a block away. And that goes a long way. I can very quickly become much more peaceful by just taking a walk on the boardwalk and enjoying the lake. And I mean, it's truly beautiful down there. So that water is a very big thing. Remember years ago in my corporate career, the company moved me to Dallas, Texas, and it took me a while to figure out that the ongoing sense of angst I had was because water, trees, and mountains are the things that give me peace and joy, and none of those things were true there. I didn't have any of those things. So being near water, and so in Paris, I'm walking along the Seine. I spent some time in Ireland this past summer and was walking along cliffs overlooking the Celtic Sea and that sort of thing. So water is big for me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for being here with us today. It's a treat
Oh,
to
thanks
see
for
you.
asking me. It's so great to see you too. I appreciate you asking me. You're doing wonderful things here. I love this podcast. So
Thank
congratulations.
you.